Good Wednesday morning. Hope you are all well. Thank you to the early crew for being here. And I already see there's violence in the comment section. And let me just say, we rarely do this, but this is one of the worst comments I've ever seen.
I don't even need to read the comment. All I got to do is look at the fact that I've never seen this picture before or this name and already know what it is.
How the hell can the NCAA be going bankrupt over NIL? NIL ain't mandatory. Tell us you have no idea what you're talking about without telling us that you have no idea what you're talking about. I love the show because you're all like Alex Jones of college football.
Infowars.com.
What makes people think the big O SEC can handle 30, whatever you were going to say? There's so much just naivete out there about NIL and this settlement that is coming. Ross Dellinger, Yahoo Sports, broke the news yesterday that the NCAA and its members, which are your favorite institution, are facing a $20 billion bill in back NIL revenue, call it damages, without a settlement on cases like House versus the NCAA.
Right.
Which it's a fait accompli. We know that if they do not settle this case, the NCAA is going to lose. You can't win when you repressed people's rights to make money. And they have proven that repeatedly. And now you have opened the floodgates to, hey, go ahead and make money off of your name, image, and likeness. This is done. The issue is, why are you not settling already? Because what's on the line for the NCAA, quite literally, is their ability to do business. What you're not understanding is, and I think there is just a lot of people who don't understand how the NCAA works. The NCAA is the governing body of athletics in college. So all of your major college sports are governed by the NCAA. Who is the NCAA? Pick your favorite school. They're in the NCAA. I'm a Notre Dame fan. Jake doesn't like college sports. I believe that's correct.
Well, me. Why aren't you looking at the commenter?
Yeah, exactly. You pick your favorite university: LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, you name it. They're in the NCAA. And essentially what happens here is the NCAA is a revenue-generating operation. They pay hundreds of millions of dollars out in distributions to membership. So most of the money that the NCAA pays out, and I'm gathering most people know this, maybe you don't. Most of the revenue paid out by the NCAA to its membership is NCAA tournament tied. Because remember, in college football, your bowl payouts, your college football playoff payouts, those come from individual entities to those conferences and universities. The NCAA largely exists financially on the fruits of the NCAA tournament in college basketball. You're talking about a situation where the NCAA will be withholding revenue of up to $2 million per year per school. That's how much money we are talking about. There is going to be between a 40 and 60% revenue shortfall to cover these NIL settlements, which the individual universities are going to have to pay out of pocket. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And when you look at this idea that we haven't gotten a settlement yet, and the news that Ross Dellinger broke, and if you're not reading Ross Dellinger, my guess is you're not that much of a college football fan, because I happen to think Ross Dellinger is one of the best journalists in college football. He got his hands on a settlement document, and for the first time, he is telling you that you're looking at $1 to $2 million in reduction from NCAA disbursements. And that if they do not settle, they're looking at a $20 billion bill that is due immediately, in full, no payment plan. Whereas if you settle, you're looking at a couple of $1 billion paid out over a decade. This is a big deal. And if you don't settle this case, and they will, but if you don't settle this case, you have no other avenue but to file bankruptcy and reduce that debt and try to find a way to pay this judgment off at a much smaller value. But it also cripples your ability to make money and do business. I think, and I guess I'm going to assume you will agree with me, Jake, but I don't think there's any other avenue forward here for the NCAA but to settle.
Yeah, I mean they're being held over a barrel here, and it's a position they put themselves in. And I think that the NCAA is in a position here where they need to settle, and it's just going to come down to negotiating the fine print and making sure that everything that is talked about in the settlement is good. Like, there's a portion of this settlement that's being proposed that I don't think many people know about, where they're talking about, hey, this settlement will get reviewed if it comes to pass that NCAA athletes are deemed employees by the courts or of their own accord. And it's things like that where you have a lot of X factors in the settlement that are being negotiated, where it's just simply like, hey, like, there's a lot of things that could change. But really, in the NCAA's position right now, they have to settle. You have to do this if you want to survive, which is why I say the settlement, as you said, is going to happen. You're not going to go from paying a couple bill. I think the Ross article says the valuation is $2.7 billion is the exact number that they're kind of working on together on both sides of the table. You're not going to go from that to 20 immediately, right? The NCAA is just not going to do that. So for anybody saying, hey, this settlement's in jeopardy or not going to happen, or whatever the counter argument is, you're up in the night. They are going to settle. But the only question really is, hey, how do the disbursements work? Who's going to have to pay the most? And when you start looking at the numbers, like, again, a round number of between 20 and 30 million, depending on who you are, that's a lot of money. And I don't care what your name is or what school you are. Like, that's a lot of money for Alabama and Georgia. That's a lot of money for Notre Dame. That's a lot of money for really anybody. So it'll just be really interesting to see how this, as we always say on the show, the unintended consequences. Because if schools have to pay this extra cost, where are they going to recoup that cost? Because they will recoup it. They will do something to backfill, as we always say. And it's just a matter of what that's going to be. And that's where I think and again, this is probably another conversation, but the Super League, that's why the Super League can't die or isn't dead. Because that concept allows everybody to make more money and put this issue to bed. And once that happens, I think you will see everybody in the sandbox will be much happier. But until that happens, I don't really know how you move forward in a comfortable way if you're these universities.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about universities being on the hook for $300 million in total with this settlement, because what happens is it also creates a revenue structure where you're revenue sharing this money, $20 million a year. Do you guys understand how much money that is? Think about that. We're not talking about monopoly money. We are talking about real world dollars, where $20 million a year will be given to athletes out of your revenue. That is a staggering number.
Mm-hmm.
That is cost cutting to the bone. And this is where Title IX comes in. This is where equality comes in, because sports are going to get cut. I don't think that you are looking at major universities cutting sports. I think you're looking at G5s. If you're at smaller schools, you're going to lose water polo. you're going to lose lacrosse.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to lose track and field. You're going to lose sports. Again, as I always say, I think your stick and ball sports are fine. I think your basketballs, your footballs, I think you're fine. I think it is the club sports. I think it is the non-revenue generating, hey, this sport is a liability on the P&L.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you're going to start to see that you're going to cost cut.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is in the settlement, it says, according to Ross, it says that Title IX enforcement is going to stay at the school level. So the NCAA isn't going to take that on. They're going to the same way it works now is how it's going to work. And I think that's a really interesting situation to be in, because obviously Title IX is obviously a touchy subject and a valuable subject, and one that needs to continue to be enforced, and it needs to stay at its current level. And I think that the problem here is that when you put universities in a position where they're going to make less money, the first thing that they're going to look at is, hey, like, okay, where can we cut? Where can we save money? Like, hey, like, how are we going to survive? And that's the hard part here.
And you're looking at, this is from Ross's article at yahoosports.com. Like, here's what happens if you don't settle. I mean, this is what happens if this is
$20 billion,
a catastrophe,
bro.
Yeah. I mean, the estimated $20 billion in damages would likely be payable immediately after final judgment, not over a decade period. The result in the NCAA and leagues filing bankruptcy. While bankruptcy may temporarily derail the active antitrust cases, it would move litigation to a bankruptcy judge for a decision, requiring restructuring of a new model, and would open schools to new direct claims from plaintiff attorneys. Which, again, I continue to ask, how are you going to continue this without further protections? And I think this is the main, from what I've heard and the people that I've spoken to about this, the main question that these administrators have. Because remember, we're not talking about athletic directors and football coaches making these decisions. We're talking about chancellors and presidents and legal counsels making these decisions. They want to know how to insulate themselves from further litigation. And right now, there's no way to do that. And I think we can go back. What is this? Our 10th year doing this show or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
For the last 10 years, what have I told you on this show? It's the rich white guys trying to keep all of their money in their pocket.
The old white hairs.
And this is where it's come to roost.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the idea, and you can point to any athlete that you want over the history of time and in these lawsuits. But I think in football and basketball specifically, this is where the old white guy trying to repress the inner city black kid has come back to haunt. Because at its heart, that's what this is. You're a rich guy and you don't want to give money because you gave them a scholarship. And yet you wanted to argue about whether you owed them for that shoulder injury for the rest of their life until it was fully recovered. Or that knee injury. We haven't even talked about the rumors of CTE lawsuits from college athletes who never played in the NFL. We haven't even talked about that. Like, you have to understand at some level, you can continue to hoard your money and keep it close because, my God, but at some point you're gonna let go of that bag. Those purse strings are gonna open.
Yep.
And we're here. And what you're looking at now is all of that oppression that has happened for the last 50, 75 years. You're paying the tab for that right now. And I hope you enjoyed your run. And I hope you bought your yachts. And I hope you bought your new lecture halls.
And I hope you have a stockpile of money that's protected and untouchable.
Because you look at this right now, like, that's a lot of money. The NCAA is responsible for paying the amount over 10 years, roughly $277 million annually. That's in the best case scenario. And as I said earlier, 60% of that will come from a reduction in distribution to schools. And you continue on this show. We talk about it almost every day. And almost every day, the hyenas in the comment section are like, college basketball sucks. This is all about football. No, it's not. If you haven't figured out yet that college basketball is the tipping point in solvency at the NCAA level, I don't know what you're looking at. Why do you think Brett Yormark has been so vehement and so passionate about driving revenue through college basketball? Because the football money is contracted. Football money's there already.
Mm-hmm.
They need new revenue streams.
Yeah, you've tapped the football well. You're not.
You're
like,
under contract.
Yeah, I mean, it's basketball is where you're going to get, where you're going to get your gains, where you're going to backfill, or where you're going to make more profit. And I think that, these conferences have to find a way to get back to a place where, they're making money and a lot of it. And when I say making money, I don't mean revenue, I mean profits. They have to get back to a place where they've got, their 20 or 30 grand in their bank account on their level, whatever that works out being in the millions, 50, 60 million, whatever that looks like. And until that takes place, I'm telling you, people are going to operate from a very protected position. It's like these conversations we have about, the average Joe American on the show where people are struggling and not doing great. Like, these conferences are very much in a similar position when it comes to this stuff, where they have to say, hey, like, how do we, like, where can we go to get more money? Because it's not going to be football. So basketball is the next natural sport up on the ledger, because that's the next highest revenue generating sport. It's not lacrosse or rowing or water polo or chess club, man. Those aren't, generating revenue. Basketball, though, is. And the Big 12 happens to be one of the best, if not the best, conference in a basketball conference in the country. And until people start accepting the idea that the tournament does matter and the tournament is going to get expanded, and it's only going to get expanded because people need to make more money for college athletics to move forward. Like, yes. I don't know what you guys are looking at, because that's where we're headed. There is no other outcome. And so for all the people, and this would include Ross, and I love Ross, literally does amazing work, some of the best work in the industry covering this stuff.
Yes.
Dude's out here talking about how the Super League is deadpanned and, it's not a thing. And I'm saying, how could it not be a thing? How, like, if you're sitting in Greg Sankey's shoes, if you're Tony Petitti, Brett Yormark, right? Hell, if you're Bubba Cunningham at UNC, are you not sitting here saying, like, hey, dude, we need a way to make more money? So how are we going to do that? How can we all get in a room and be like, yep, we're going to go to a new model that makes it easier for everyone to make money? Because that's the reality of the situation. It has to happen.
So let me get this right. You're looking at the NCAA holding back, let's go worst case scenario, $2 million a year per school to cover some of these expenses. You're looking at the NCAA cutting up to $18 million per year in expenses. We call that oversight, enforcement, while at the same time creating a new enforcement arm to oversee collectives. You're looking at a situation where not only is the NCAA going to have to withhold $2 million per university, but the NCAA proposes sharing $22 million per school in revenue generation. So this is it's not optional to create new revenue streams.
Yeah.
And again, I feel like most people write this off as, it's no big deal. They make a ton of money. Ask San Diego State. Ask any G5. Ask Fresno State. Utah State. Hey, why don't you go ahead and break me off a $22 million check over here? Would they be able to afford athletics? My guess is no.
That's why Brian Kelly and Buddy at Boise State are taking the stance on NIL that they're taking. They're not trying to pay any more NIL than they need to.
And I think that's why you are going to see the G5 is going to break off and do their own thing. I think you have to. So how many universities can Tarleton State? It's a shocking disclosure.
Well, and I think
It's this. If you haven't read Ross Dellinger's article, please, I'm begging you to go and read it.
think about the resentment of the G5 as well, though. Like, the NIL situation is hardly the G5's fault, right? We can't play it both ways. Oh, the G5 is they need to do better. They got to do better. But at the same time saying, hey, like, you still got to pay you got to pay the penalty for what the power conferences have been doing all these years. You got to pay a price for what the heavy hitters in college football and college athletics decided not to do in this case, which was pay kids. And that's where I say, hey, if you're the G5, I agree. A, you resent the hell out of the power conferences on some level because you're paying for their greed with this situation. But B, you have to get in a more controlled situation. It's the same thing that Brett Yormark's trying to do with basketball. Hey, we're trying to control more. We're trying to get to a place where we can say, okay, cool. The G5s are going to get their own college football playoff. They're going to get their own bowl system, all that. And hey, if you win the G5 natty, you can move up next year and play P4s if you want, or whatever it winds up being. But the point is that we cannot continue to have little guy over here sitting at the same table with big dude who's got 20, 30, 40 times more worth of money to work with. It just simply doesn't work for anybody.
No, like, and I look at the idea of the Super League. And I know that people continue to pan this, but I'm telling you, call it what you want. Super League, God tier, I don't care. It's coming because we need the ability to drive revenue higher in football and more through college basketball. And if we have the college football championship game on the Saturday of Super Bowl Sunday, and we get the college football championship and the NFL championship in the same weekend, that just makes so much sense. If we get, and I think one of the things that you're going to have to come around to is college football players are going to play more games. Whether you want them to or not, they're going to play more games. The first 3 weeks of the season, I think, are going to be contracted, a shark hunting, huge games, big matchups. Wow. Did that just happen? Did you see that?
Yeah, I did.
Everything in our studio just blinked. Let's hope that we continue.
Okay, thank you.
Move on with life. You're going to see huge matchups in the first 3 weeks of the season. I truly, truly hope that we move to a place where we don't get Iowa and Michigan in the Big Ten championship game. I hope we never see shit like that again, because that was brutal.
It's embarrassing. I mean, it's embarrassing. Right? It doesn't serve the sport. And it's like this whole Fox situation with, week 0 matchups being heavy hitters that are playing at 11 a.m. on Saturday. Like, people are all pissed off about, the week 0 stuff. And like, why are these primetime games being played at 10 a.m. in the morning? It's like, I don't know, maybe because that's the TV agreement. Maybe because that's how they can get paid. Like,
I hate it.
Like, do you think that they have a choice? Like, come on.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you're going to have to put up with a lot of things that you don't like. I agree. The noon kickoff Eastern thing sucks. I hate it. But it's what Michigan and Ohio State wanted. And so they got it. I think when we're talking about the biggest matchups in college football, December and January now become incredibly important months. You notice that they changed the dark periods and recruiting and signing periods, and December now becomes a very pivotal month on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're going to see that once all of this settles, and I think you create a super league, and I think the G5 goes off and does their thing with the championship of G5 conferences. And I could see a place where the G5 champion is decided the first week of December. And then that team who wins the championship goes on maybe to make the college football playoffs. I don't know. But largely, I think the G5 can't afford to play on this level. You cannot. And we can sit here and say, do you want a God tier? But that's not the question anymore. You need a God tier. You have to have it. Private money has to come into college sports.
Yes.
It's not optional anymore. You have to have the Toyota Club. You have to have better concessions, better entertainment, better food options, better parking options, better seating options. You better have NFL style stadiums with really good amenities. You better have it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how else you do that without spending a crap ton of money. And that money is now less available to you unless you bring in private money, unless you bring in more sponsorship dollars, unless you play football games in Mexico, unless you play football games in Australia.
Why do you think the NFL is going overseas so much, bro?
Yeah.
Like, why do you think that you're seeing all this new inventive stuff in sports? Because you can't just sell the same thing every single year and think that you can just bump the price up $10 million. Like, that's not how this works. You have to create a new opportunity every single time. And it's this whole thing. Like, I think it flew under the radar a little bit, but like Bob Iger at ESPN for the first time in however long talked to like all the shareholders and all these investors in
Upfronts,
ESPN.
yeah.
And you're starting to see folks like ESPN, the Big 12, like the NFL are really starting to get creative about how they get people to buy into their product. And I'm just telling you, that's why the Super League idea or concept is not dead and is never going to be dead.
Well, I also think this is where a lot of people get pissed off when we say nice things about Deion Sanders. The reality series he has on Amazon Prime, the social media stuff, this stuff's not optional anymore. And guys like right here in Jutta, Kyle Whittingham, get on board with it, man. You've got to do it. And I think largely Witt is getting on board with it.
Hey, Mullet, you might want to get on board.
You can't do what Dabo Sweeney does at Clemson and win at the highest level. And anymore, why do you think Alabama's first call was to Dan Lanning? Because he's a young gun that recruits, that embraces it, that gets it, that wants it, craves it. That new cutting edge college football attitude that you have to have.
Mm-hmm.
It's why Nick Saban's at ESPN and Dan Lanning is still at Oregon, right? Because the game has changed a little bit. So I think that it is really going to be interesting to see how the arms race shapes itself. How do you look at who's the best team in the SEC? Georgia or Alabama, probably.
Gotta say Georgia right now, just with coaching changes and stuff.
So how do you take Georgia's football experience and drive more money through it? Well, that $1,000 per seat ticket license, or ticket cost on top of a personal seat license, where you get a padded seat, and that's the game experience has to get better, right? So you're going to see more renovations of stadiums where footprints don't change, but amenities are included. You look at social media. You've got to have better Instagram and Twitter and Snapface, and got to have it. YouTube has to be a thing at the college football level. Has to at the D1 level, the God tier level. You better have the Phillips 66 Okie Light mullet lice check on YouTube presented by your mom. You better have it. That's what all this is. So we can sit here and we can go around, but this stuff's not optional anymore. Kids want to be seen. Kids want to be paid. So you're going to have to pay them.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a decade of very interesting growth and change in college athletics.
Yep.
You think they're going to expand the NCAA tournament? Monty, you don't know what you're talking about. We're not doing that.
What are you doing? What are you talking about? You guys are at the Alex Jones of sports YouTube.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, dude.
Whether you want to or not. Whether you want to or not, they're going to do this. It is as like this thing in the ACC that we talked about yesterday. And it now, why do you think North Carolina is rattling cages now? because they got to look at it. The ACC, Ross Dellinger, talking about how this document was shown and presented to the ACC. And you think it's a coincidence that North Carolina's cage rattling and talking about getting out?
They got their green light.
Because they saw what the tax man wants. Speaking of, I paid the IRS $900 yesterday. Not fun. Anyway, the point is,
yeah,
North Carolina saw the bill that's coming. And maybe Florida State knew this already. I don't know. I know this. Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti knew this was coming, which is why they did what they did.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, how's the NIL going bankrupt over, or how's the NCAA going bankrupt over NIL? Yeah, they're not.
It's so confusing.
They're not, Charles. You do you.
Yeah, I don't know how we could ever come to the conclusion that NIL is absolutely piping the NCAA. Pete
Forte, first one in. Good morning to you. OG Gary, hello. Good to see you. Daniel Dixon, John Dry, Dakota Tubbs, good to see you, my friend. Morning, fellow Jagoffs.
Well, you're getting back on brand.
I like it. Mountain Mama, take me home to
Dude, you gonna read this comment right here?
Where I belong, West Virginia. Mountain Mama. Nothing?
Apologize, didn't.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't sing it all. It's hump day. Make that like button your bitch. Hit the like button. Please. I appreciate that. Make the like button your bitch. Okay, good morning.
Hey, good talk.
Caps Lock Chad. The Caps Lock Chad. Hello. Good morning, good people. Hello. NCAA Bankrupt. Just because you file bankruptcy doesn't mean you're bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
It's a negotiating tool.
Yeah.
It is a tool. This screams Super League is no,
dude.
No.
Your comments are offensive. The Super League would never actually happen.
It's never happening.
Even if there's a fire.